Hello and welcome to the Morning Scoop. It is Tuesday, August 23rd. Classes have officially started up today at Ohio State, which means me and the football players have all entered into our personal hell for the next few months. But you know what? The positive sign about classes starting is that football is literally just right around the corner. We're one Buckeye football-less Saturday away from the game against Notre Dame. I still can't be any more excited for that game. Yesterday, Ryan Day and Jim Knowles took to the podium at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center to address both a little bit of the Notre Dame matchup and to kind of recap the end of fall camp. So let's jump right in and take a look at some of their comments and see what they had to say. First off, Ryan Day said that the cornerback room is finally starting to get closer to getting back to fully healthy again. They'll have the rest of this week and into the game preparation next week to sort of fully get back. But Denzel Burke and Cam Brown had a few nagging injuries that they're trying to get fully better, and also Jordan Hancock was obviously hobbled earlier in the year, which has forced Jair Brown and J.K. Johnson to kind of step in during training camp. But they're pretty happy to say that they're finally getting back there. Day noted that he thinks they're going to be at full strength for Notre Dame. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean the corners are going to be 100%, 90%, 80%? We'll just have to wait and see, but he feels pretty confident that they're going to be game ready. And I think that bodes much better for Ohio State's chances. It makes them certainly feel better about the state of the cornerback room, which was giving them some problems with the injuries. But on the running back front, Day, with the loss of Evan Pryor was obviously huge. But Day mentioned that Dallin Hayden has had a great camp. He just recently got his black stripe off. He even said that Hayden was drinking through a fire hose a little bit. So that tells you how he's had to learn on the fly, really a lot since the Evan Pryor injury, and he's been thrust into a bigger kind of role. But Day said he's been doing a great job, and that aligns with a lot of what we're hearing about him. He probably won't play much this year if I had to guess, but staff is really feeling quite good about him as a player moving forward, and they still feel great about Henderson and Williams. Obviously, that should be one of the best duos in the country. But Day did echo that Hayden's probably the third guy going in, and Day even mentioned that they've moved Chip a little bit over to running back the other day just to give him a few reps, and I wouldn't imagine that's for anything other than an emergency, but you never know. In the case of a catastrophe, we could have a reverse Zach Boren instance on our hands, 10 years to the day, in fact, even. How about that? But moving on, Day did also, he was asked about C.J. Stroud, obviously, and he talked about the relationship a little bit, kind of gave us an insight into what makes the two of them tick. And Day said in terms of the relationship, Stroud's really almost like kind of a coach on the field right now, just with the way he sees the game and how a lot of their conversations, and Corey Dennis echoed this the other day in his press availability, where they talked about how Stroud is really now focused more on the why things are being called the way they are, and they can really start getting deeper into that because he does have such a deep understanding of the offense now that a lot of those conversations now are, when you're dealing with a smarter individual like Stroud is, you have to kind of explain things a little bit and why they're being done the way they are. And, that just shows you the kind of trust that they have in him, that shows you the kind of trust he has in the coaches, and he's really capable of shouldering a bigger load on the offense as a result, and because of the way they communicate and the trust they have in one another to make the correct play call. And, they have it sounds to me like Stroud and Day really have a very mature relationship as far as a coach and player goes. And when you have players that really trust their coaches, the sky can be the absolute limit so long as the coaches are good. But nothing to worry about there, since Ryan Day is one of the best quarterback developers in the country. But I would say that bodes very well for Stroud in this season. He's going to have a lot more responsibility as an older guy. And it's just really going to come down to how he comes out and executes while having a bigger load on him. But I think he is more than equipped to respond. And Day, just on a kind of a general level, was asked about his general observations for camp. And to me, Day really seems to think they had a great camp. You can kind of read it in his body language a little bit. He kept mentioning that they practiced really, really hard and ramped up the intensity this year, which I don't know what was going on the past few years, but they're getting better, and that's all that matters. And the team's general toughness, it has really, really started to improve, and that aligns with pretty much everything that everybody is hearing right now. And it feels, just when you watch these pressers, you get a sense of watching the players and how they respond and how the coaches respond. It just feels like overall there's a little bit more urgency in the room and in the building than we had seen over the past few years, for whatever reason that may be. I think they really have started to realize they have a really elite group this year, and that if they can get the culture to the point where it is elite in the building, then the sky is really the limit to how far they could go. And on the injury front, Dave addressed a few concerns. He obviously mentioned the corners and how important that is to have depth at that position and get all those guys back up and running. He talked about the situation with Evan Pryor and having Dallin Hayden come in. But he also, provided an update on Cam Babb, who's unfortunately, dealing with another nagging injury. But they're being pretty cautious with him. They don't expect it to be anything terribly serious. It's just given his history, they want to be a little bit more delicate with him, and that's probably the right approach, realistically. And, they're not expecting more than a few weeks with that. And I hope, they're really hoping they can see him back early in the year. And he played really well in camp, and they really want to get him on the field because let's be honest, no one deserves a big year more than Cam Babb does. And I think we're going to get to see him at the very least. And it's going to be sooner rather than later. Now, Jim Knowles also met with the media today. His ran a little bit longer than it usually would, but there's a lot of questions for the new head guy, and there's really never been more excitement around a new coordinator hire at Ohio State. So, like Ryan Day, Knowles seemed really pretty happy to say that the starters at corner are getting back up to speed, and he mentioned that really makes the defense play with a bit more confidence. And I have to imagine that when you have a D-line as good as the team does, and you feel like you can force some chaos, in the passing game just based on getting pressure, quarterbacks are going to make some bad decisions, and when you have corners that can make big plays on the ball, that's going to be pretty big. But he also said that even in spite of those guys being hurt, it was still really helpful just for Jair Brown and J.K. Johnson as individuals to get those meaningful reps in practice against receivers that are really, really good. And I personally, that can only help their development, right? The only way to get better is to have reps against guys who are good and learn from mistakes and learn from success that you have. And that's what it's going to come down to at the cornerback position. And those two guys are, looking to be mainstays here going forward. And I think these reps were very good for them. So Knowles was also at one point asked if he had any concerns about the defense in general, and he said that he really doesn't have any, and that he even said later that everything else at Ohio State is top 5, so why can't the defense be top 5? And that's really him telling us what the expectation is. He's expecting a top 5 defense. Ryan Day expects a top 5 defense. That for year one, that's a massive goal to hit. I believe it was Zach Smith that talked about the importance of under-promising and over-delivering. Well, Jim Knowles is promising pretty heavy here. That's a massive bar that he's going to have to hit. But that's also a good way to keep guys motivated. There's going to be that next thing you're trying to get to. But it really seems like that Knowles seems to believe that he's come into a big-time program with a lot of big-time talent, and he's just really, really excited to see the way that these guys work, the way that the information kind of sticks to them in a way where they're learning a bit faster than maybe they had as previous other stops. And he just seems like a guy who's chomping at the bit to see them get rolling into a game situation. Now, he was also asked about how much of the defense has been installed, and he says about 75%, which is what he feels is ahead of where he thought they would be. He did note, though, that even when you get into the season, you have to start to trim that down a little bit for your particular opponent and personnel matchups. And I think when he says 75%, I really think he's kind of down. It's kind of coach speak to me. The core philosophy and what they want to do fundamentally on defense and the rules that they have set, those have to be in place by now. Those had to be in place during the offseason. You had to know the defense going into camp. And, for me, when he says that only 75% is in, that to me screams, okay, they're going to have more wrinkles that haven't been added in yet, but those are all going to be for specific opponents and that sort of thing. But, it's a work in progress still, and, I think he's very, very pleased with where they are. Now, when speaking about some individual players, Knowles was very quick to point out how impressed he has been with Tommy Eichenberg. And he even said that if anyone, out of anyone he's had learn the system, he kind of said that Tommy is further ahead than anybody he had ever had. And that's really good to hear, just in terms of these guys being sponges. But Knowles mentioned that his ability to read keys and his eyes and get his eyes in good positions has really allowed him to boost his level of play and help him play a little bit faster, so he's reading and reacting a lot more. And he really seems like he has the leadership role of the defense, and I'm really looking forward to watching him play, and hopefully he has that kind of year that we all thought he would, just based on his recruiting hype. And he mentioned Eichenberg, and he also mentioned, Lathan Ransom is another guy who, and he talked about him pretty extensively, and he talked about how fast his eyes are to diagnose things and how he just goes to the ball like a freight train once he sees it, and he triggers really, really fast. And they're really pleasantly surprised to see where he is in his recovery from his injury that he got in the Rose Bowl. I mean, we saw him getting hauled away in an air cast, and now he's, back in January, and now he's getting ready to suit up against one of the top teams in America, at least in a small capacity, if nothing else. So that alone is pretty big, and having him back and adding depth to that safety room is going to help create kind of an embarrassment of riches there. Now, Knowles actually gave us a little bit of a preview for the Notre Dame matchup and things they're going to try to do with the offense. Someone asked him the question about stopping Michael Mayer, who's one of the top tight ends in the country. He might be the top tight end in the country, if we're being honest with ourselves. And Knowles said, simply put, it's very important to know where he is when he's on the field. When you have someone lined up like that at the tight end position, at the line of scrimmage, it's important that you have a guy that's similar sized and plays the run really well in that sort of situation. Then in the pass game, you don't want to, you don't want to give him any free releases. You want to chip him. You want to hit him hard at the line of scrimmage when he's trying to run his route. And then when you have a safety like Ronnie Hickman or Lathan Ransom, who is physical enough to play with a tight end, and could be a little bit better at playing the ball, but they're physical enough to stand in there and bang with a tight end, which is very important for a safety. And that just kind of gives you an insight on what they're trying to do. They're trying to make sure he's not getting any free releases. They're trying to make sure they play him physical when the ball is in the air. And as far as the individual matchups with Notre Dame is concerned, how the Buckeyes defend Mayer is going to be huge for the passing game, because Notre Dame is so depleted at receiver, and they're also going with a first-time starting quarterback. So, that's going to be a huge matchup in the game, which we'll break down in more detail as we get further along into game week. But that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. There will be more Buckeye content coming to you at this channel daily, and there will be more content coming to you at buckeyescoop.com. Thank you so much for your time, and you all have a wonderful rest of your day.